So good evening or good day, good morning, everyone. And welcome to the weekly Dharma gathering online. My name is Shantae Paradigm Smalls. I'm really excited to have you here. If you can hear me and I can see you, just give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up? Okay, great. So I'm really excited about our special guest teacher tonight, Karen R. Brown, who I'll say a little bit about in a second. I just want to give you the rundown for the evening for anyone who's not ever been on one of these. We started this in February of this year, these weekly Dharma gatherings. So we'll start out with a little intro that I'll give. And then tonight, so I'm the tech host, so I'll be doing all the technical stuff. And then I'll give about a 15-minute meditation, guided meditation. And then I will turn it over to Karen Brown to razzle dazzle us with her expertise. And then Karen will, orient us to how she wants to do her presentation. So just some technical things. I will keep everyone muted. If you want to speak and you're on video, you can raise your hand. I will unmute you. If you're not on video, you can just, if you're on the phone, you can indicate, let's see, can you raise your hand? You can't raise your hand on this. You could just write in the chat box that your question if you're on the phone. And if you can't do that, then you can just, I don't know, we'll figure it out somehow. Okay. We are recording. So if you don't want to be if you don't want your face to be recorded, you can stop video, which is if you're on your laptop, which is on the lower left side. Otherwise, people will be joining in and out of the room, and let's get started. So, let me read Karen's bio here. Tonight's talk is called Discovering and Respecting Boundaries and Limits in Spiritual Practice. And our guest teacher tonight is Karen R. Brown, licensed mental health clinician, who is a somatically oriented psychotherapist who specializes in working with traumatic stress through body-oriented and resource-building pathways. Her subspecialty is training caregivers and first responders in self-care skills and in the amelioration of secondary traumatic stress. Karen is also a longtime student of the Dharma and maintains a private practice in New York City. And I also just want to add my personal note that I've known Karen since 2004. And she's been a tremendous resource in my life and a tremendous mentor and guide and healer in my life. And I just think she's a really amazing human, and I'm very, very excited for her to be with us here tonight. Okay, so I'm going to, with that, just one quick announcement, which I'll make again at the end of the session, the night. We're going to take a 2-week break, the first 2 weeks of July. So next week, KT Tierney will be, they will be teaching on non-dualism. And then we're relaunching the series, so more on that in a couple weeks. And so we won't have any weekly Dharma gatherings on the 3rd and the 10th. So, are we ready to meditate? So please come into a comfortable seated position. Whatever that is for you, whether it's on a cushion or a chair or something else. Taking your seat, literally and figuratively. And before even coming into a sense of meditation, just check in with yourself. Sometimes people say you can scan your body, but check in with how you're feeling in your body. And whatever it is, you can just acknowledge that without trying to change it. How you're feeling in your emotional field. End of the day for some of us. And how you're feeling in your mental field. Just having a sense of what the ground is for those three aspects of yourself. You know what material you're working with as you get ready to meditate. Your posture is one of where your seat is, you're sinking into your seat, neither leaning forward or leaning back, but being right in the middle, present of your seat. Feeling your sits bones sink down into your seat. And there's a sense of natural balance sitting on the earth. If you're in a chair, your feet should be touching the ground if they are able to. And your knees can be at 90 degrees. And if you're on a cushion, just taking a comfortable seated position, cross-legged or whatever is comfortable for you. And just feeling what that feels like to be rooted in the lower part of your body, the tiger part of your body, which is associated with confidence, meekness, humility. And from that lower part, you rise up. Your upper body, your front is soft, open, relaxed. It's receptive. And your back is your strength. So it's holding you up, but it's not uptight. As my friend Maho likes to say, it's upright, but not uptight. And there's a sense of balance between this soft front and this strong back. Your spine is like a golden bamboo rod that goes from your pelvic bone through your back, through your neck, ending in the middle of your skull. And it's resplendent, strong, flexible. Your body drapes over it. This middle part of your body is the lion, the relationality, happy, joyous. Your shoulders are relaxed. And your arms can drop them to the side of your body and then just bend them at the elbow and place your hands, palms down, where they land on your legs or your thighs or your knees. The shoulders and arms are like the outrageous Garuda, and they represent a feeling of equanimity, having neither a preference for this or that. And finally, your neck and head rests comfortably on top of your shoulders, making sure the neck is not stiff, relaxing the jaw where we carry an incredible amount of tension, relaxing the throat, relaxing the ears, the forehead, relaxing the eyes. Your gaze is ahead of you, letting your eyes touch the whatever they see downward, the length of a human body, 4 to 6 feet. Relaxing, relaxing the mouth. This is the dragon, inscrutability, wisdom, sense of humor. And as you come into your posture, just begin to feel the body as it breathes, bringing your attention to the body breathing, your regular breath. And you've been breathing all along, but now you're paying attention to the feeling of the breath going in and out of the body. So you have a lot to work with. Whether you're feeling the breath in your back, your lungs, throat, hips, lower belly, wherever you may be feeling it. Feeling the body breathing. And as thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensation arises, if it takes us away from the feeling of the body breathing, we can just very gently acknowledge it, feel a sense of gratitude for noticing, and then gently return our awareness and our attention to the feeling of the body breathing. Meditation at its root is a mechanism for self-regeneration, self-care, self-discovery. So now I will turn it over to our teacher for tonight, Karen Brown. Please teach us. Thank you.
I will do my best. Thank you. Thank you, Shantae. Thank you for that wonderful meditation. It's a perfect entry point for beginning to talk about and explore the boundary. What is a boundary? What are healthy boundaries? How do we access those and use them in a healthy, functional way in our lives? Um, I'm a body centered psychotherapist, and in body centered therapy, we use a lot of the tools that are familiar to meditators. We're working with awareness of direct experience, we're working with noticing our sensations, particularly body sensations, emotional and feeling states, to inform us about what's happening inside and to help us more accurately respond to both our inner states and what we meet in the outside world. And my particular modality, it's called bodynamic. It's a modality that comes out of Denmark, is a developmental model. And we look at how we develop our motor skills, our emotional skills, and our cognitive skills all together. I'm making a weaving motion with my hands for those who can't see you. And we call that in total psychomotor development. And in that model, we consider the boundary sense and boundary formation as a natural part of the developmental process. And the beauty of developmental psychology, one of the beauties, is that if something in our own development has been interrupted, we didn't get to form it fully, or we had to give it up, we can pick up that development at any time in our lives. It's never too late. And I have quite a passion for some of the skills and resources that I teach. Boundary sense is one of them. And my passion for these skills arises from the fact that they make a big difference in people's lives. And while we have to give it time and we have to practice these skills in small ways, it doesn't necessarily take time to begin to notice a difference. So that always gives me a lot of joy and excitement to share some of these skills with others. And I'll talk in a minute or five, I'll talk about particularly the context of spiritual practice, because I think it's very important. And I think in this era, it's imperative that we start to bring this into our conversation about spiritual practice and spiritual organizations. So what is a boundary? Simply put, our boundary sense is our natural capacity to protect our physical body and our personal space from intrusion. So we have our concrete physical boundary, which is our skin. Everything inside my skin is me. And then we have an energetic boundary or personal space, which extends farther than our physical body. And for some people, it could be defined by how far they can spread their arms around them. For each person, it's a little bit different. But every living creature, from a one-celled organism to a mammal, has a natural impulse to protect its own bodily space and its own energetic space from intrusion or from others getting too close. So think about a dog. What does a dog do if you've passed into its personal space and it does not want you there? Well, it might growl, its hackles might rise, and if you don't back off, it may lunge at you or bite you. And this is the way that the dog is signaling to you that this is a no, stop, no closer. And human beings are very much the same. We have our natural impulses to protect our body and our personal space. Now, the complexity, boundaries are very complex, and we have different boundary sense in different contexts. So on the subway, we feel different than if we're at home, relaxing. If we're with our boss, we feel very different in our boundary sense than if we're with our friend. So there is a complexity here. And how do our boundaries form? Well, our boundaries form as a result of our developmental process, our personal history, what culture we live in, our successful boundary experiences, our unsuccessful boundary experiences, and certainly from traumatic experience. Many, many traumatic experiences involve a boundary violation, a crossing and disruption of our personal boundaries. Now, that can happen as a result of a form of abuse, or it can happen from a car accident. But there will be a rupture in the boundary sense. So all of our experiences in total inform our relationship to our own boundary sense. And part of our boundary sense is conscious, and part of it's a little below consciousness, and some of it is very unconscious. So in my practice, both with individuals and groups, I'm often working to provide experiments whereby we start to just get the data of what our boundary style is. And that's very, that alone is very informative. So when we begin to restore our bodily ability to sense and signal our boundary, this can also help us. So we first learn it on a bodily level, and this can help us also with our psychological boundaries and our sense of limits. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about boundaries in spiritual practice. Now, I am not an expert on the psychology of spiritual organizations, but I've done a lot of reflecting on this, and I've belonged to some spiritual organizations in my life. And so I'm going to offer you some thoughts that I've had. These are all perspectives I've come to through my own life experience and through doing a lot of listening these days to people on the topic. So these days we hear about very serious boundary violations, sexual assaults that are going on and have gone on historically in either religious or spiritual institutions. And this is very interesting because for those of us who participate in spiritual organizations, they occupy a very special and sacred place in our hearts and minds. And in most spiritual and religious organizations, ethical behavior is very much focused on in the foreground, at least for the congregants. So the awareness of ourselves, the awareness of others, caring for others are all part of spiritual practice, especially when we practice in a group. Boundary violations and sexual assault are a direct contradiction to the values that we venerate in spiritual practice. So why is this happening? Very interesting question. I've come up with 7 things that I'm going to share with you, and I will be looking at my notes a bit because they will help me. So one thing I've reflected on is how we expect that spiritual teachers and leaders are well practiced in the ethical behaviors that are taught and promoted in the teachings. In fact, many organizations, probably most, hold a code of ethics and rules constraining teachers from forming a close relationship with a student outside of the defined teaching role. It's normal to expect that these guidelines would be followed, and very confusing when they're not. And it's that confusion that can get us into a little bit of trouble. Also, the second piece is that there's a natural asymmetry to the relationship between teacher and student. And this is in anything. It could be in learning how to ride a skateboard. As students, we enter into an asymmetrical relationship with a person who knows more than we do about the very thing that we want to know about. In any asymmetrical relationship, there's a power imbalance. Whenever there's a power imbalance, the person in the place of less power is more vulnerable to boundary crossings or violations by the person with more power. Now, boundary violations can happen in symmetrical relationships as well. By and large, they can be a bit easier to navigate. Again, that's not a rule, it's just an observation. My third point is that in some spiritual traditions, we are encouraged to transcend the normal human frame. That can mean many different things. It can mean that we go beyond what we consider the ego. As a psychotherapist, I have great respect for, sorry, oh my God. Oh, a machine just turned on by itself. I have a very healthy respect for the skills that are held within the ego. And I think they have a very strong place in any spiritual practice, while I also know that there are times and places that we're not in the ego personality part of us. But I have worked with some individuals who belong to a tradition where boundaries are considered something to do away with. And that was fascinating. And there were a lot of boundary issues in that community. Now, I was just working with individuals from the community, and always found a challenge when starting to work with the boundary sense. My fourth point, spiritual teachers are often considered to be above the worldly plane, sort of better. They're better people. And we anticipate that the things that they do and suggest are right and good for us, even when they feel bad or if they feel bad. We often come to spiritual practice at moments of great vulnerability in our lives with the hope that we will be guided by sane leaders. And that's leaders who walk their talk. And I would say personally, when I was much younger than I am now, I absolutely expected that the leaders in my spiritual traditions were walking their talk. My sixth point is that boundary violations and sexual assault are hidden within organizations, both consciously and unconsciously. If we're experiencing a boundary crossing, we may try to talk ourselves out of it, expect ourselves to be able to handle it, imagine that it's not so bad, or being very afraid to bring it into the foreground for fear of not being believed or being rejected. So there's a lot of complexity in bringing boundary crossing, boundary violation into the open. And not all boundary issues are extreme matters of assault. They can happen on other levels too. For example, many organizations, in many traditions, the student is encouraged to volunteer a lot of time and work to support the organization. And service is considered to be an important part of the spiritual path. Now, in many instances, this works well. However, many of us may override our personal limits of time and energy in order to feel as though we are a member in good standing. As human beings, we all want to be accepted by the group, and our sense of belonging is very, very important. And that can lay the groundwork for overriding our own discomfort or sense of unease with things we're doing, being asked to do, or ways we're being treated, or ways we're being spoken to or touched. So I'd like to pause now and see if anybody has a comment, a question, anything. If you do, just signal to Shantae and she will call upon you.
You can turn on your video and raise your hand, or you can type in the chat box, and if you have a question, I will unmute you.
Question, comment, reflection, statement, disagreement, all is welcome in this format. Okay, if not, I'd like to offer some, we're going to do a couple of exercises together. And Lisa, I know that you're on the phone, so I'll try to give, even though I'll be demonstrating physically, I'll try to give clear audio instructions so that you can follow along. So, first thing we're going to do, well, first I'd like to say that whenever I invite people into any kind of exercise or activity, I really want to invite you to use your own sense of what's right for you. So sometimes boundary exercises can evoke a lot for people. So I respect that. And if you just want to listen, that's fine. If you want to do it along with me, that's fine. If you start doing it and it's not okay for you, then please stop and do your own version. All of that is very good. So first, we're just going to take a moment to sit quietly and sense our own bodies. So you can close your eyes or leave them open. And you might just start with noticing the sensation of sitting in your chair. You might notice the movement of your breath. You might notice your emotional quality right now. And take a moment to notice where you feel the best in your body, or if there's not a best, the most neutral. That might be where your sits bones hit the chair, or it could be your little finger. And notice what it's like to hang out in the place that you feel best for a moment. Really sensing into that sensation. And now I'm going to invite you to bring a life situation to mind, a situation in which you experience your boundary being pushed or crossed. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most intense, please choose something about a level 4. We don't want to start with something very extreme. And as you bring that situation to mind, I invite you to notice what happens in your body. You may notice very obvious changes, or they may be very subtle. Your breath might change. Your muscle tension might change. Your thoughts might change. So take a moment with that. Just noticing. Okay, now I'm going to ask you to shake that out of your body and let go of the situation you brought to mind for a moment. Just shake it out. Take a breath, breathe it out. We're coming back to neutral. Now, what we're going to do, I'll show you, is we're going to draw our energetic boundary with our own arms. So you can stand up for this. I often have people stand up in my office. I'm going to sit down because I want you to be able to see me. So we're just going to draw this space around us with our own arms. All the way around. Just make sure that you get the full circle. Draw it above you and draw it below you all the way down to your feet. And you can imagine that it extends even below the floor a bit. And take a few moments to really sense that and get as much of your elliptical energy field as you can. And when you've done that, just take a moment to notice how you feel having done that. And if an image comes to mind of what this space around you looks like, what the texture is, or if you'd like to have some guards at the edge of your boundary, could be a dog, it could be a fence, then go ahead and let the image, bring the image to mind as well, and see what that adds to your experience. Okay. And we're going to add another layer to this. And the layer we're going to add to this is a push movement with the arms. So you can see me, I'm doing it straight out, but I'll turn to the side. So I'm starting close to my body and I'm pushing out. And just try that slowly a few times. We're using our natural boundary muscles of our arms where we can push things away. And you might want to see if it feels stronger with your arms staying slightly bent at the end or fully extended. Just experiment with that. And you can try it to the side as well. If your arms get tired, please rest. And take a moment to just go inside again and notice what the effect of having done that push movement is. And now let's try the push movement and add the word stop to it. So, and you can do it with one arm, you can try it with both arms, you can see which arm feels stronger. So you're just gonna, I'm gonna do it with one arm for a moment and I'm gonna stop. Stop. So I tried it with my right and I tried it with my left, and now I'm going to try it with both. Stop. So go ahead and experiment with that a little bit. And really taking time to let it register inside and to notice what happens. And notice which of these activities, the pushes or the drawing of the boundary, which do you prefer? Which feels more naturally satisfying, more naturally available to you? They do have a layering quality. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, having done those activities, to bring back the situation that we started with. The boundary crossing or boundary intrusion that causes you a level 4 or 5 or less of discomfort, bring it to mind again. And notice what happens now. Does it feel the same as it felt the first time? Are there big differences? Are there little differences? And take all of this as data. Some people will love certain activities and really strongly dislike others. That's okay. Just take that as data. You have your own individual way of organizing in your own body-mind system. And if you didn't notice anything at all, that's also okay. That's your experience. So now I would like to invite some feedback, some responses from you about what you experienced. And anybody is welcome to chime in. I love to hear from people. It's also informing for the group.
So you can just unmute your microphone and speak, or
Oh, I see Amy, but I don't hear her. Hi.
I don't think she's talking. I think she just turned her video on. So Lisa said, I liked the image of dogs guarding my boundaries.
Oh, great. Lovely. What did that give you, if you don't mind my asking? You don't have to answer, but I always just love to hear from people.
I felt protected.
Nice. Nice. And when you brought the slightly disturbing image to mind again, did it feel different to you in any way? Safer. Thank you. Yes. Sometimes just doing these activities, the motor behavior of these activities brings something very innate more into the foreground. So we might feel calmer, or we might feel more safe, or we might feel more powerful in terms of being able to say, stop, I don't want that. Anybody else? So I believe that in group settings, it's very challenging to hold our boundaries publicly for many of us, because we tend to go with the behavior that's modeled for us in a group. And so my vision is that we need to begin this conversation. It's time for spiritual organizations or religious organizations to support healthy boundary formation. Now, in the group and in individuals, now that might not start from the top, right? It may not start from leadership. By and large, this might be a grassroots kind of bubbling up. But how can we support each other to begin to, first of all, sense into the nuance? So a big question is, how do we know when our boundary's been crossed? How do we know? Well, our body has a lot of data to offer us. Sensations, feeling icky, feeling disgusted, feeling scared, feeling like I want to move away, feeling like I never want to go back. So part of this process is really beginning to take the data that your bodily and emotional states have to offer without judging. We can deeply evaluate our own experience without judging it. For example, I might feel really creepy in the presence of a certain individual, and I don't even have to judge that individual, but I can take my own inner data as a clear sign that I don't want to get closer. That is for me and about me. I believe that in our sanghas and in our spiritual communities and in our congregations, we also need to be able to go to each other and say, I want to check this out with you. This happened. This is my response. Do you have feedback? Now, in my mind, that's very different than gossip. That's very different than trying to color people's opinions about another person. It's about being able to serve as very real, concrete support, get feedback from people we trust, who we respect, who might be able to validate our experience or help us develop a strategy. So these are some of my ideas about how do we bring this conversation into our spiritual communities and groups. Or it doesn't have to be a spiritual group, it can be any group. But this is the gathering that we're in right now is a Dharma gathering. So again, I would just like to open the floor to feedback, questions, joins, disagreements, any input that you have from your own life experience. Yes, Sante.
Thank you, Karen. This is really great, and particularly in this context. And so I'm wondering if you could say more about how, other than, of course, centers can invite you to train them, but how we begin to do this work, how we could integrate you into teacher trainings or to leadership trainings in spiritual communities. How would you suggest we begin to integrate this type of work?
This type of work. Shante, that's a really excellent question. So I believe it starts with somebody like you or anybody else on this call, and you are in a leadership position. And so just for you, just to start to, as I know you do, reflect on these things and integrate them and start to name them. I think even starting to name it. So at the beginning of a retreat or a weekend of teaching, that we start to give these things names very specifically, right? So I know that every retreat I've ever been on, we take vows, the vows at the beginning of the retreat to respect the practice ethics. And I think in that kind of a conversation, we can say, and we're adding this, right? Please be respectful of other people's physical boundaries, their physical space, their physical possessions, and please be respectful of your own, right? If anything arises around this, it's fair. We encourage you to bring it forward with somebody in the Sangha, right? So I think we have to first start by naming it. When it's named, people start to notice it more, bring more awareness to it, and feel permission. Now, that can happen, anybody can do that, right? But that it starts to be really put into the foreground. And in any communities where there's been a history of boundary crossing, there might be that bringing it into the foreground will help support the people who are still participating in that community. Right? We're not going to leave this in the dark. We're going to bring it forward and start to talk about it. And then, you know, if there's a desire for more, I of course love to teach this. So I'm happy to teach it anywhere to anybody. And I will tell you, I have taught this work in post-disaster situations because it helps people who've just gone through tremendous disasters to start to reestablish their own local personal boundary space. I've taught it to first responders. I've taught it to students. Of course, I teach it to all the people I work with in my practice. I've taught it to clinicians who work with very, very challenging populations so that they can use it for themselves and they can also teach it in their context. So it's very transferable.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I was thinking one of the things that I've started doing, and then I see some comments, so I want to let you get to what I'm teaching, and also other people have started doing, is we do community agreements. And those have been really valuable, sort of from harm reduction, and people add to them, and we, if it's a more than a day or something, we remind people and we agree to them every day. And we also make space for oops and ouch, for mistakes to happen, or for bringing up either you noticing you've done something that's caused harm, or speaking up, or maybe saying to someone. And it's actually broken some of the I think white cultural taboos around thinking that Dharma spaces are utopias, and actually making room for the inevitability of conflict, and actually not being afraid of that, and welcoming it, but making sure that it can be held and dealt with appropriately. And it's really been Great. I'm learning a
And
lot.
that's awesome. And I see that Jules says, I'm going to read it aloud. My experience has been when there is power concentrated in one person or institution, then it is hard for the person whose boundaries are being crossed to come forward. I agree. That could be any institution. That can be a school, or an office. Sometimes they aren't believed. That's also very true. One solution might be to create a safe, neutral person that people can go to interrupt the power. I love the idea. And this is part of the grassroots groundswell, because I don't know that it's going to come from the top. I'm not sure. There may be leaders who are willing to participate in that way. But I do think that we have not to wait for the people in power to create the neutral person. Yeah, that we're going to have to say, kind of begin to assert these ideas from the bottom up, from the middle up, from part of the leadership horizontally. It's a very interesting experience I've had in my own work, that the clearer I am in my boundaries, the safer people feel with me. So when I hold the time boundary, when I hold the agreements from my side, and when I bring them into the room and name them if they need to be named, my experience is putting boundaries in the foreground creates safety, and it creates safety for most of us. Now, for those of us who've had a lot of boundary disruption and perhaps from an early age, at the very beginning to acknowledge the boundary may feel very scary. And that's a part of it. So I want to acknowledge that, and I don't assume that this is easy. We have a lot of healing to do, both individually and culturally, and in our own communities, on repair, boundary repair. So any more of your wonderful comments? I like Lisa's comment about it's about honoring your felt sense. Yes. Anybody else? I really like the ideas. I'm just reflecting for a moment. I'm just starting to, your comments have, really also really inspire my thinking about how we broaden and bring this into the foreground, not in a way to squash anybody, but as a way to begin to bring it into our everyday consciousness. As I often say with the people I work with in my practice, we are navigating our boundaries 24 hours a day, every day. We are navigating our boundaries on the street. We are navigating our boundaries on the subway. We are navigating our boundaries at work. We are navigating our boundaries at home. So this is a part of our lives that is happening all the time, but our awareness of it is often way into the background. Anybody else?
Okay.
Okay, I mean, there's so much more to say and do. I don't want to get too far afield from the topic that I set up for tonight. I can talk about and teach about boundaries all day, literally. But we're dipping our feet into the water of boundaries, and maybe some of the things I shared tonight will stimulate all of you's thoughts about spiritual practice, spiritual institutions, how we begin to address some of the ways that boundaries have not been in the foreground. Boundaries and limits. Oh, I have one more thing to say, and that is about our internal authority. So here's a model that I use in my work. So when we enter a religious or spiritual organization, and when we're in the mode of practice or learning, well, like I said, it's an asymmetrical experience, and there is a hierarchy, generally speaking. And there's a natural tendency, if it's an organization that we want to be part of, to defer to people in higher places of authority. But a very key question is, can we choose to follow from our own inner authority? Now, so in other words, let's say, Shantae, I hope you don't mind if I just use you as an example. So let's say Shantae was my meditation teacher, and I'm going to try what she offers me as long as I feel safe and comfortable with it. But can I choose that from a place of inner authority where I know I can always say no, or I can always say, this was okay, but this isn't okay? So that my yes and no is always coming from my own internal place. And this is some of the work that I teach in groups is what we call leading and following from our own authority. So I can follow from a place of authority. I can lead from a place of authority. It's my experience that as we begin to clarify our boundary sense, and we start with the body, the boundary sense in the body, and we get more differentiated from the rest of the world. Often this, technically, this is called a homologous push, both hands pushing. Often that can give us a feeling of differentiation. I had a graduate, used to teach in a graduate program, and I had a graduate student, and we were doing this in one of our classes. And for the first time in her life, she had an experience that she wasn't just part of the overwhelm of everything going on. And it was a really aha moment. So these bodily movements that are quite natural to us have a lot of power when we use them in certain contexts and can really help us. So I'm very interested in this, not only the question of boundaries and the question of holding our personal authority to say yes and to say no, to feel safe enough to signal it to the outside world, and to encourage every one of us to come from our inner authority. Now, there may still be a hierarchy. However, the hierarchy is has a very different feel if we each feel that we have an internalized sense of authority. Any responses or comments? Anybody? Okay. So I believe that's all I have for you tonight. I can't hear you.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I just want to remind people, well, one, thank you, Karen, for this teaching. I think it's so valuable, not only in the world, but in our community in particular, and in spiritual and religious communities as well. So this talk has been recorded, and it will be uploaded within the next 24 hours. So you can listen to it again. You can suggest it to the leadership at work or at your local Dharma center or whatever group you're working with. Is there a way that if people want to get in touch with you, that they might to maybe have you come and do this work? That is there a website or an email or something?
I do not have a website, shame on me, but I do have shame on me. I do have an email.
So we can send the email out to, with your permission, when they send out the video, they can send out the email.
Yes.
We're registered. Okay, great.
Yes, and you have my email address.
So people want to get in contact with Karen and bring her to your work or center or other religious organization, she's available, or do a Zoom with her, she's available for that. Just a couple of quick announcements. Next week's talk will be KT Tierney, and they are from Pittsburgh, and they will be leading a talk, meditation and a talk on, hold on, the two truths: identity politics, non-duality, and radicalism. And so that will be next week. And then we'll be taking a break for 2 weeks on the 3rd and the 10th. And we'll be relaunching on the 17th with Dr. Hun Lai, who is a Lama based out of Asheville, North Carolina. And he has a center, Urban Dharma. He's a Tibetan Lama, and he's also a scholar. He's also a religion scholar. And then we will be having Lama Rod Owens at the end of the month. So we have a lot of great teachers in July and August. So I hope you can join us, and more will be revealed. So thank you so much, Karen. And if people would like to.
Thank you, Shantae.
You.
And thank you, everybody, for joining and for your comments and participation. Much appreciated.
Be well, everyone. Be well, Karen. Thank you.
Bye for now.